Welcome to another episode of the All Pop No Culture podcast. I'm your host this week, Kevin, and I'm all alone. Nobody could make it this week, so I wanted to make it quick. I tried to take some advice from a commenter from several weeks ago when I did a solo episode, and I'm really trying to keep my ums to a minimum, trying to not just recap everything I've watched and kind of break it down at least a little bit into my thoughts about the shows, so hopefully I'm doing that. If you catch me not doing that, or you think I can be doing something better, or any of us doing something better as we record and go along, definitely leave a note in the comments. For anybody new to the show, we've been getting a lot of new viewers. These solo episodes are not the norm. I just don't want to see us miss a week of recording if we don't absolutely have to, and so I did this episode by myself rather than let us go a week off. Next week, we should have a couple people back. Andrew was traveling this week and he was exhausted, so he'll probably be back next week. Jen is doing a dance thing this week, so hopefully she'll be back next week, and then we'll go from there. As always, don't forget to like and subscribe. Don't forget to share if you're enjoying the episode. The easiest place to share it usually is Facebook. We share it on the All Pop No Culture Facebook page, which you can check out. We're also on Twitter and Instagram, although we don't update those quite as much. So probably stick with the Facebook page, but that's easier to share out, like I said, with other people on Facebook. If you're a Twitter whiz, follow us over there and share that. And as always, we hope you enjoy the show. So I'm on my own again this week. So I'm going to make it a nice short episode. Really quick, last week we talked about Miss Davis. I just want to take a chance to talk about it again really quick. I'm caught up on it now. I think there's 5 episodes out on Peacock. And it's pretty solid. I really enjoy it. One of the things that I like about it a lot is that it's very quirky. It's a lot of fun. It's really cheeky. I think some of the humor is a little silly, but I think that's what makes the show work. It's more entertaining, I think, than The Diplomat, which I'll talk about in a little bit. It's more fun, really, than anything I've watched this week. It's more fun than The Last Thing You Told Me, which I do like. It's more fun than Love and Death, which I liked. It's more fun than The Diplomat, which I thought was okay. I don't think I'm as high on that one as everybody else. But what I think sets Miss Davis apart is just how much fun it really is. It's a show with a silly, kind of crazy premise that works because they lean into the silly and crazy. If you missed it when I talked about it last week, it's a show about a nun who is searching for the Holy Grail because she's basically being asked to by an AI. And that's really the premise. And if that sounds crazy to you, it is. But it actually makes the show really fun. I think Betty Gilpin is doing a great job. She's hilarious. At the moment, I forget the actor's name that plays her kind of partner in crime, but he was the star of the sadly short-run show Limitless that only got 1 season, and I really believe should have gotten at least a 2nd season, if not more. I thought that show was great, but talk about that another day. I really recommend Ms. Davis as long as you're not looking for something that is true drama. There's things in there that are super crazy. There's a British Knights commercial that they shoot for the show that, I'm leaving that way out of context, but it's really funny and weird. And I mean, just everything about the show is kooky and fun. And I think, like I said, I think Betty Gilpin's doing a great job. And it's one of those shows that I think is smarter than it seems like on the surface. It's definitely, pushing some of those religious boundaries and what's real and what's not to certain people. I think the fact that you're searching for the Holy Grail is a little crazy, and what their Grail looks like doesn't look like the Grail that we're used to, which I think is kind of neat. I actually kind of like the idea of seeing a Grail that is not your traditional, Holy Grail. And the things that are brought about by this Grail are really interesting. But anyways, for now, I'll leave it at that. I don't want to give away too much. I think if somebody else watches it and we have a chance to talk about it together, I'll probably break it down a little more and get into more spoilers. But for now, I feel like it's probably being slept on a little bit. I think most people watching probably haven't started it. And so I would recommend that you do, but I don't want to spoil anything for you. So go in, have a good time, and just enjoy what they're putting out. I also this week got caught up on The Last Thing He Told Me. I think Jen and I talked about it a little bit last week, and I think it's still a good show. I still wish it was picking up the pace a little more. We're slowly seeing answers to the mysteries that are being presented. If you missed me talking about that one, that is Jennifer Garner's show on Apple TV Plus. She plays a mom of a teenage stepdaughter. She's kind of your stereotypical teenage stepdaughter. She's really hard to get along with. She really doesn't want Jennifer Garner's character in her life. And they are out searching for Jennifer Garner's husband and the father of this girl who disappeared after his business did an Enron, right? Like they screwed over a bunch of people and they're all going to jail. So the dad has disappeared. Although it does seem like that is not necessarily the only reason that he's left. And again, I don't want to spoil too much. I think you have to have Apple TV to watch it, so that probably limits this a little bit. But I definitely recommend getting out there and watching it if you do have Apple TV. At this point, we're 4 episodes deep into the show. It looks like it's going to get a 7-episode run, so we're just past the halfway mark. It's definitely interesting, and there's things going on. We get a nice, in episode 4, we get a nice cameo from Victor Garber, which is a lot of fun, I think, for both of those actors, Jennifer Garner and Victor Garber, because Victor Garber played her dad in Alias, and they were really close in that. So it's fun to see them get a little screen time together and you know put that stuff together. I think they work well together. I think what really makes this show special really is, I mean, Jennifer Garner is incredibly talented. I really like her as an actress. The teenage daughter is doing a really great job. I think one thing that's really special is the relationship between the two of them and how that's playing out on screen. They don't get along a lot of the time, and they do have their conflicts, and I think that plays out really well between the two of them, and I think that's a testament to their acting. I have to imagine, from what I've seen of both actors, they probably get along really well in real life, so the way that they clash on screen really works, and they, you know, the show's starting to come around. They're having their moments where they really do get along. When they do, I think those moments are special. So I think as the show progresses, we're going to see them kind of mend fences. If you watch the first episode, there's definitely a moment in there that seems like it's taking place in the future, and a lot of the episode has kind of flashed back from there. So I'm really curious to see where that moment ties in, because it doesn't look like it's necessarily the best moment between these two characters. So it'll be interesting to see where that goes. One thing I think that I pointed out last week that I'm excited to see develop just on a personal level too is seeing Todd Stashwick show up a little more, I hope. He's another guy that was in Star Trek Picard Season 3. He was Captain Shaw, and I thought he did an awesome job in that. I know he's been in stuff before, but man, I really want to see him kind of take off right now. I really think he did great work in Picard. He's only had a couple of moments on screen so far in this one, but he's doing really good work, and I want to see more of him. I think we joked a little bit last week, but I think it'd be cool if they found him a spot in the MCU, or, to be fair, at this point, James Gunn's DCU. That's about all I have for the last thing he told me, but I wasn't going to talk about the DCU really this week, but since I said it, I know that James Gunn is out there and he's casting for Superman is the only thing they're really casting for right now. They haven't cast a Superman. But one thing that Gunn said he's really looking for is somebody that kind of oozes that American good boy charm and kind of has the American spirit, and somebody that looks comforting and kind. And I think if we didn't already have Tyler Hoechlin, and if we weren't trying to go younger, I think Tyler Hoechlin's perfect. but I think they're going to tell the story of a 20-something, early 20-something Superman. So, they're going to have to go somebody new, but I think Tyler Hoechlin makes a great example to use for that. So if they find someone like him, I think that'd be super cool. It's just, if you watch Supergirl, when whatever season it was when Tyler Hoechlin Superman first shows up, it's just a great moment. He's saving a kid from a car, and he saves the kid, and he gives the kid a smile and a wink, and everybody's happy. And it's really easy to forget after Cavill Superman, who I love Henry Cavill, and I thought he did a great job. But Zack Snyder's Superman was a little too dark for me. I think Superman is supposed to be, fun. I think we need Christopher Reeve's Superman, at least the mentality back. I thought, Brandon Routh had an opportunity to do that. I didn't think that was the best Superman movie ever made, but I did enjoy it. And Routh definitely had his moments where he was very much like Christopher Reeve's Superman. So just somebody along those lines, but a little younger. I think we're going to go with somebody that really looks, early 20s. And I think Gunn's story is about Superman finding his place in the world. So I'm excited for that. Other DCU news that I saw this week, it sounds like Pom Klementieff from the Guardians of the Galaxy is potentially talking to James Gunn about being in the DCU. I know that people that work with James Gunn are fiercely loyal, so I wouldn't be surprised if at some point, all of the Guardians show up over there, although maybe Zoe Saldana's done with superhero movies between the Avengers between Guardians of the Galaxy and Avatar. I mean, she's been in the 3 highest grossing films of all time, 4 highest grossing films of all time, something ridiculous like that. So we shall see. I don't know anything, to be fair, but I'm really curious to see where that goes. I was really hard on the whole idea at first, especially with James Gunn jumping in and choosing to create his own Superman movie and then putting himself in as the director when he's supposed to be overseeing the whole universe that the DCU is creating. But, the more I look at stuff and the more I read things out there, the more I think maybe just need to be a little more open to it for now. So I'm going to wait until I see a trailer, and hopefully something really good comes out of it. So we'll see. Next up, I think, even though I have the absolutely lovely Elizabeth Olsen here behind me and her show Love and Death, I want to talk about The Diplomat really quick, which came out on Netflix. I think it started last week, but it dropped all in its entirety. So there was 8 episodes of The Diplomat starring Kerry Russell and Rufus Sewell. Kerry Russell is known for Felicity. She's known for her work in The Americans. Rufus Sewell did The Man in the High Castle over on Amazon. Many years ago, he was in the absolutely amazing Dark City. So it's a good set of leads. The premise of the show is that Kerry Russell is a diplomat, and she's been shortlisted to take over as the vice president. The vice president is planning on stepping down. Nobody knows this. We don't know, why she's necessarily on the short list for the position, but to kind of prove her mettle, they sent her over on this diplomatic mission in the UK because a British aircraft carrier was attacked in the Gulf. And so she's sent over there as an American diplomat to kind of help them settle things out. The show is really interesting because I think it really takes its look at the political figures as if they're almost the current acting political figures. The President of the United States is being played as an older president. It's played by Michael McKean, who was born in 1947, so he's right around 75, 76. So, I mean, he's not young. And Biden's around 80, and they kind of hint a couple of times at maybe he's having a hard time because he's older, which is a common complaint that, people make about Biden as president, whatever. And then the leader of the UK is really brash and kind of over the top and is maybe not quite as crazy as a Boris, whatever his face was, but he's played by Rory Kinnear, and he does a great job in the part. I think he's a little wiser than Boris was, but he's scheming. He really wants to make a mark for his country. He wants to. He actually comes across a little bit like a warmonger, like he's looking for a reason to get into a fight, but he can't do it on his own. He needs the resources of somebody like the U.S. And so what's happening in the story, essentially after this, aircraft carrier gets hit, is, we see this political intrigue with, who actually did the bombing and how it's breaking down. And Kerry Russell's character is really sharp. She has a really good idea of who it likely is and definitely who, likely it wasn't. And so she's in there trying to get people to look at things a certain way, and kind of focus the investigation into the right direction. And like I said, she's really smart. I think her character is really great, but she's manipulated a lot by her husband, played by Rufus Sewell, who used to be the ambassador for the U.S. And I should say that earlier. Kerry Russell's character is sent to become the ambassador for the U.S. in the U.K. And then that's how they're kind of vetting her as president. Rufus Sewell used to be the ambassador, but he has a bit of a conflict with the current Secretary of State, played by Miguel Sandoval, he's been around a lot. He was in a show called Medium that I really enjoyed. He's been in other stuff, but he's really good here as a very stern Secretary of State, not always particularly likable, and you can see how he wouldn't get along with these two characters, Kerry Russell's character and her husband. But Kerry Russell's husband, Rufus Sewell's character, Hal, he's a manipulator. He's a diplomat because he knows how to manipulate situations, how to get people to do what he wants. At one point, Kerry Russell's character, her name's Kate, is talking to somebody else, and she basically says that one of her, what is probably considered a subordinate, although his actual primary job is to kind of groom her to become the vice president. They call him a kingmaker, even though he's really behind the scenes. But anyways, she kind of points out that he's very manipulative, and so at first when he's talking about Hal, he's always saying Mr. Weiler or Ambassador Weiler or former Ambassador Weiler, talking about him with his last name, and then he gets kind of manipulated and pushed around by Hal in a way that he doesn't recognize, right? Like he thinks that Hal is, being super kind, and then after that he starts referring to him as Hal, and that's when, Kate laughs and says, "Oh, well, you're calling him Hal. That means you've seen the real Hal now. So he's being actively manipulated now." And so there's a lot of manipulation going on in the show, and I think that stuff is definitely really interesting. I think the way people are pushing other people around and things are being discovered, and all the political machinations behind the scenes, the way the Prime Minister really isn't showing his true colors, and all the things that he's doing are really well played out. I think how the way he's pushing things, we come to find out that he's the primary reason that she's up for this ambassador role and for this shot at the vice presidency. But we also find out that, he's a bit of a troublemaker, and Kate and Hal are starting to look at going through a divorce. They just don't quite get along. I think she understands, over time that has figured out over time that he's really manipulative, and she doesn't really want a part of that anymore. She's ready to, be her own person. She's ready to step away. But at the same time, we see through this show how he manages to always kind of pull her back in. It's really interesting because they say at one point that he's not the cheating type, even though they're getting a divorce, and they kind of cover that. and exactly why she feels confident she can say that. And that's kind of interesting too, the way that plays out. He's I mean, again, all the characters are super interesting. The one thing that bothers me about the show and really kind of knocks it down a peg for me, that actually puts it even below the Night Agent for me, which I didn't totally love either. But there's an attempt at real cheekiness that doesn't work. Like, it tries to be too funny sometimes, and it's a show that's not a comedy. The drama of the show itself, I think, would be better served with less silliness. It's okay to have your jokes and have your comedy in there, but the way that they deliver some of their jokes just doesn't really fly for me. It seems a little forced. It seems like they couldn't quite tell, especially in the first episode. The first episode was the one that really got me, where there was a little too much funny that felt forced. I think they really could have done without it, or at least tamed it down a little bit. I mean, it's still a good show. It's very interesting. The other thing that really bums me out is the way that the season finale ends. It really feels like the end of an episode where there should be one more episode. It reminds me of another show on Netflix called Warrior Nun, which was not as good of a show. It was entertaining, it was fun, and it was a good time, but it wasn't a great show. But the way that it ended, you're waiting for that next moment. I think what happens at the end of that episode doesn't feel as dramatic as it should have for a season finale. I don't want to give away what happens, but there's a moment, and I think the way that it's shot, I think it looks less dramatic to me than I think they intended it to be, or I think they intended to be more dramatic than it looked to me. And I think it's just either they needed one more episode or they needed to make it a little more dramatic. I think what they want us to believe, I don't think most people are going to believe that that's how it's going to go because of the way the drama is set up. I will leave that for you guys to decide. I would definitely say to give it a watch. I mean, there's a lot of things about it that are really good. I think Kerry Russell's performance is great. She's maybe a little too stereotypically tough girl. Like, she doesn't want to be a woman. Like, she always tries her hardest to wear a suit instead of wearing a dress. Like, she wants to be tough. She doesn't want to be too girly. She doesn't want to feel too weak, whatever. She's almost a little bit of a caricature in that way. In the same way that Hal is a little bit of a character, because he's, always just a little too skeezy, even though, he gets what he wants from everybody. So it's not bad. It's just, it's a caricature in a lot of places, and a lot of it feels a little too silly. But overall, it's entertaining. And to be fair, like, I think I watched the entire show in 2 days, and it's 8 episodes. So it's not like it's bad. I didn't ever want to quit watching, or I didn't hate it or anything like that. I just had, little nitpicky things there that I think are fair to have. I think it could have been better, but it sure could have been worse too. So I would say go give it a watch. It's over on Netflix if you haven't watched it, and enjoy it. I think, like I said, they're doing a good job with it. It's going to get a second season, I believe. I've already seen that out there. So it definitely has somewhere to go, because they have not closed up the story at all. And the cliffhanger they leave it on, like I said, probably just for the way they did it, feels like it should have had one more episode to close out what they did in the cliffhanger, and probably could have ended with a different cliffhanger. Although there is a good moment in the last episode where we kind of figure out, who the big bad is of the whole season. It was a hair predictable, but at the same time, if you missed it at all, I can see how it would be a really cool shocker. So give it a watch. I really enjoyed it, and it's solid. Like I said, I like probably the Night Agent more. At least the Night Agent, the kind of premise of it was a little preposterous, so the things that happened I could forgive. This one feels like it's supposed to be set in something more dramatic, and then that's kind of why the things that don't quite line up, they're just a little too silly. So that brings me to the last thing I want to talk about, which is Love and Death on HBO Max, starring Elizabeth Olsen and Jesse Plemons. This one is based on a true story. Takes place in, I think, 1980. And it's essentially the story of a woman. She has an affair, and there's a murder involved. It seems like, at least from the very first shot, that Elizabeth Olsen is the killer. To be fair, I haven't bothered with the true story. I might check it out when this is over. HBO went ahead and dropped the first 3 episodes all at once, so you get almost 3 hours of television right out of the gate. It's definitely a slow burn at first. You're definitely learning about your characters and who they are. It's a small town. I think it's Texas. It's definitely, it is a small Texas town, right? So everything kind of revolves around the church and activity there. And it's really interesting. So the premise of the show is that, both Elizabeth Olsen and Jesse Plemons are both married, seemingly, happily married or okay with their marriage, right? They're happy enough. Nobody's leaving anybody or anything like that. Jesse Plemons' character is trying to have a baby with his wife, and Elizabeth Olsen already has children of her own, and her husband is a nice guy, just not quite attentive to her. So both Elizabeth Olsen and Jesse Plemons' characters are in a church volleyball league, and one night before practice, Jesse Plemons' character is working on having a baby with his wife, so they're having sex and fooling around. And then he comes to the game, and they're playing, and Elizabeth Olsen's character gets knocked to the ground and kind of bumps her head for a minute, and so she's laying on the ground a little dazed, and he leans over and offers to help her up, and he's right there to help her, and she's a little, kind of awestruck. And I've seen a lot of backlash out there in the world about how, Jesse Plemons may not be the most beautiful guy, and, why is Elizabeth Olsen fall in love with this goofy looking guy. But you've got to put that to the side. I think it's probably the casting is probably true to the characters. Again, I need to look it up first before I can say for sure, and I probably should have, but I digress on that. But anyways, he leans over and helps her, and then afterwards she's dazed and she keeps kind of thinking about him, and then she's talking to her friend, played by the absolutely wonderful Kristen Ritter, who I adore. And it's a weird look for her in this one. She's got the big hair. She's got red hair. She usually has black hair. She wears a little bit, maybe too much lipstick, because it's got that 80s feel to it. But she's great. I mean, she's Kristen Ritter, and she's fun. And so, but anyways, Elizabeth Olsen's talking to her, and she says, I haven't been able to stop thinking about it since then, and, blah, blah, blah. And he smelled like sex, which kind of, pheromonally speaking, if that's a word, kind of gets into her brain. And so, they keep having these little moments. And so one night after they were refereeing a different volleyball game, they're both leaving at the same time. And she asks him to sit in the car with her because they're close. All the families in the church are close. They know each other. They've talked to each other a lot. So, on the surface, them sitting together in a car and talking for a minute isn't something that she wouldn't ask before. But anyways, they get in the car, and she says that she's been thinking about him a lot. And this isn't a spoiler because it's in the trailer, but she looks right at him and she's like, "How would you like to have an affair?" And so he's very, taken aback by this and doesn't really have an answer. But then he kisses her, and then he just leaves. And so, and the rest of these first 3 episodes are kind of how this unravels. They decide to have this affair. And, one of the really fun things that happens when they really start working towards doing this thing is they sit down and make these rules. And there's this fun scene where they have this chart on the wall where they're listing out their rules of things that they can and can't do in terms of the relationship. One of them is they can't fall in love with each other. If one of them wants out for any reason, they both just kind of have to accept it. And so they go through this thing. They have their affair, and then they start to realize the impact that it's having on their regular lives, and then at the end of the third season, somebody's holding an axe. I don't want to give anything away because we're only 3 episodes in. Looks like this is another show that's going to have 7 episodes, so we're already almost to the halfway point, just out of the initial release. After this first burst of 3 episodes, it's going to be weekly. So when you go to watch, you can only watch a week at a time. So if you want to hold out and try and catch it all at once, you can wait a little while and start watching it. I definitely liked watching. I think I caught the first 2 episodes one day and then the 3rd episode the next day. But it even though it's a slow burn at first, because it's really setting up your characters and it's really setting up this world that they're in, and who these people are and what their relationships are, it plays out really well. And I think it actually moves. It's contradictory, but it moves pretty quick for a slow burn show. One other thing that gets set up in the beginning too is Elizabeth Olsen's character is really close with the pastor of her church, which is a woman, but she reveals to Elizabeth Olsen's character that she's going through a divorce. And so as this divorce starts to unfold, she decides to transfer to another church out of town, like far away. And so they're going to get a new pastor. And so that, I think, shakes Elizabeth Olsen's world a little bit too. Like, she's losing one of her best friends. But it's a really interesting story because it's all about all this deception and all these things that are unraveling in, a small town in a really tight-knit community. And because of the things that they are doing and the people that know and the people that find out along the way, this place isn't a place that is designed to handle a controversy. It's your very typical or prototypical small town, close-knit, group of people. So it's really good. I think they've done a great job casting this one. There's not a lot of necessarily recognizable names. There's not a ton of people that are superstars beyond Elizabeth Olsen right now. She's kind of in her prime. I think Jesse Plemons is too. People kind of sleep on him, but he's a really good actor and he's doing, really good work. His character is super chill. Like, he's really kind of quiet and unassuming and definitely not the guy that you would think would be having an affair. And so, he's not being manipulated by her by any stretch, but he's definitely the weaker link in their affair, right? Like, she knows what she wants and she's going after it. One of the things that is great is as the affair starting, one of their rules is she gets to pick the location every time. So she's responsible for where they're going to have their dates, but she packs a lunch every single time. So she takes all the time to make a lunch and bring drinks, and it's in its own way, it's almost kind of sweet, and until things start to break down. But it's just really interesting, and they're doing a really good job. Tom Pelphrey is in it. He's been in some stuff. You'd recognize him when you see him. I think what I recognize him from is Iron Fist, and he's been in Ozark. But most of the people are faces that you recognize as probably not names. The Jesse Plemons' wife is played by Lily Robb, who I've recognized. I've seen her before, but I couldn't tell you from what. And obviously Kristen Ritter, and I think she's doing a great job. But what's great is that really everybody really plays their parts really well. They feel like people that know each other on the surface the way people in a small town would know each other. They don't necessarily know everything about each other. I do like how, after the first pastor leaves, Elizabeth Olsen is also best friends with Kristen Ritter, and she shares everything with her. She doesn't hold back from her at all, which is kind of nice at least for moving the story along. You definitely get, you get to see her true feelings about what's going on when she's talking to Kristen Ritter's character, which is really nice. It would be kind of nice if you had that same dynamic for Jesse Plemons' character in some way, because he does feel like a buffoon is maybe the wrong word, but he's just kind of the guy that's stumbling through this thing because, somebody thinks he's, attractive and somebody wants him. And it's the same thing for both of them, right? Like the whole reason behind this affair is that they just want to feel, pretty, and feel wanted by somebody else. And they both do that. So this one's good. I can't speak to the entire run of the series, obviously, because we're only 3 episodes in. I wish I was important enough to have the whole series to watch, but I definitely recommend this one. Go out and give it a watch. I think it's going to do really well. I don't know if we're quite into Emmy territory for this one. I could see her getting a nod. Potentially, she's just really good, and she plays the semi-obsessive, almost fatal attraction type character really well. And I think that will be, as long as she keeps that up. And to be honest, I don't know where it goes for 4 more episodes, knowing where the 3rd episode ended. It's going to be really interesting to see how it breaks down. I don't know if we're going to get to a trial. I don't know where it's going to go. It's going to be really interesting, and it's good though. It definitely has that HBO Max feel. Something like Big Little Lies or something like that. It's kind of got that feel to it. It's also worth noting this is a David E. Kelley show, so he's done all kinds of great stuff. One of my favorite shows, Boston Legal. He was involved in The Practice. Big Little Lies, actually, I didn't realize he was the creator of that. Ally McBeal, so he's got a great track record, and I think he's really doing a good job on this one. So I recommend it. Get out there, give it a watch, and and let us know what you think. I think it's going to be really enjoyable, and I think it's just going to be a really good series by the time it's done. Like I said, I think if there's going to be Emmy nods for this one. I haven't seen a single episode that stands out as like a great episode. The show itself may not see an Emmy, but like I said, I could see Elizabeth Olsen, pushing that envelope a little bit. Of all the things that I've watched this week, I think it might be the best overall performance. As much as I do love Jennifer Garner, and I think she's doing a great job in The Last Thing He Told Me, I think this is the better performance. I think she's really strong in this. So. I'm excited to see where she takes it. With that, that's really all I've got this week. I think next week I'm going to try and get into Ghosted on Apple TV Plus. It's the Ana de Armas and Captain America, Chris Evans flick. It looks like it gives Chris Evans a chance to be a little more lighthearted and fun. So I'm excited about that one. I think it's done really kind of poorly in the reviews, which, to be fair, I've liked the previews of it. So I think it getting bad reviews almost makes me want to watch it more. So I'm going to check that one out. Last night, a new show came out on Amazon Prime called Citadel. It looks like probably a little campier version, maybe, of something like The Night Agent, which might work. It depends on how it's made. That one stars Richard Madden of Game of Thrones fame, and then Priyanka Chopra, who I've never been blown away by her acting, but she's an absolutely stunning human being. So I'm hoping it's good. We'll find out. It definitely has a cheesy James Bond kind of description to it. It says, global spy agency Citadel has fallen, and its agents' memories were wiped clean. Now the powerful syndicate Manticore is rising in the void. Can the Citadel agents recollect their past and summon the strength to fight back? So there's definitely a cheese factor in that explanation. So we'll see. I don't know if that one's any good. I think Fatal Attraction starts on Paramount Plus this week, so I'm curious about that one, especially with the plot of that one and the plot of Love and Death. I'm really curious to kind of see how these two run at the same time. I really like Joshua Jackson and Lizzie Kaplan. So I'm certainly curious about that one. That one will be interesting. Another one that I'm looking forward to next week is Bupkis. That comes out on Peacock. And it seems like it's a semi-autobiographical or semi-real world story of Pete Davidson. And it definitely looks like a comedy, but maybe a little more poignant than just a silly comedy. Like, it actually looks like it's got some depth to it. So I'm kind of interested in that one and excited for that one. And then the last thing that starts next Friday, so I may or may not get to it by the time we start recording, is called Silo, starring Rebecca Ferguson, Ian Glenn of Game of Thrones fame. But that one, these people are living essentially in a silo that they've turned into a kind of a home base because they think the world has come to an end, right? And that the surface is unlivable. And it's all about, the mystery behind that are things really as bad as they think they are? What are they doing down there? So that one looks pretty good. I'd say give the trailer a look and see, and maybe give it a shot next week. And then the only other thing I'm doing is tomorrow I have my tickets to see Return of the Jedi with my kids, or two of my kids, in the theater tomorrow. So I'm super excited about that. I think I talked about it last week, but I may have seen Return of the Jedi as a kid in the theater, but I don't really remember. I would have been 6, so not really old enough to remember. I remember a birthday party that somebody had that was Return of the Jedi, but that's about all I know. So I'm kind of excited to see that one on the big screen tomorrow. So I'll probably talk about that a little bit next week. But otherwise, that's all I've got. So I hope you guys enjoyed the episode. It was a short one, covered just a few things, but I think the takeaway is that, to be fair, everything I watched was pretty good. The Diplomat isn't bad. It could be better, but it's not bad. I like it. The last thing he told me is good. It'd be nice if that one picked up the pace a little bit. I'm really loving Mrs. Davis. I think that one is so weird that it's really fun. And then, of course, Love and Death, I think, is primed to be a great show. I don't know where it's going to go, but it's going to be really good. So with that, thank you for watching. If you're catching us on the audio, thank you for listening. And we will see you next week.